Coming up, who's the best fit for Tennessee? One SEC insider's got an opinion. And how'd Auburn turn its season around? Gus Malzahn's got an explanation. We'll tell you all about it next on AT&T SEC Country Live. Happy day before Thanksgiving, everybody. Welcome to AT&T SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. He's excited about the Iron Bowl. We're all excited about rivalry games this weekend. But before that, we're excited about Thanksgiving, too. One of my favorite days of the year.
I can't wait to sit around and argue about college football with every member of my family present around the Thanksgiving table tomorrow. Should be a lot of fun.
Well, speaking of arguing about college football, what do you say we get some of that started right now? I'll remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV, and they'll help you stay connected all season long. And by the way, not for nothing, some of y'all should already make the switch if you live in the state of Alabama. If you've been following that story down there, some of you may be at risk of missing the Iron Bowl, but nonetheless, make that switch. You'll be able to enjoy that all season long. Let's go ahead and get started with all the big news and everything happening around the world of the SEC. We call it our first and 10 here on AT&T SEC Country Live, and item number one on that list, you know, Jason Swain, the former Tennessee wide receiver, does a great radio show in Knoxville, Tennessee each and every day. If you're in that area, you should check it out. And on his show this week, he had the ESPN writer Chris Lowe. And Lowe was asked about the situation with who's going to be the next Tennessee coach. Neither the host nor the guest think it's going to be John Gruden, but who will it be? Well, Lowe, who knows the SEC very well, told Jason Swain that there's one guy, a current SEC coach, that he thinks actually be the best fit for the Vols. It's current Mississippi State coach Dan Mullen. Here's the explanation that Chris Lowe gave to Jason Swain about why he thinks that Mullen would be not just a fit, but the best fit for Tennessee. Take a listen.
Mullen makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's coached in the SEC. He's won in the SEC. He's recruited in the SEC. He's assembled a staff that can recruit in the SEC. He's done it at two different places. He was the OC out at Florida when they won a couple national championships. So you talk about getting a guy that fits, a guy that knows the league, and those things are important. I think of the people that Tennessee is, we'll talk to, he makes the most sense.
I agree with Chris Lowe on this. I agree with what he told to Jason Swain there in that radio interview. Speaking from the perspective of a Georgia fan, I'm wearing my red and black today. As a Georgia fan who wants to see Georgia beat Tennessee, I don't want to see Dan Mullen go to Knoxville because I think that Tennessee becomes more difficult to beat if Dan Mullen's the coach.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And it's like I said last week after the Mississippi State loss to Alabama. In my opinion, he raised his level a little bit to a more admirable view in a lot of people's opinion. And I have an issue about the consistency of Dan Mullen on a week in and week out basis. I don't think you can afford to do that at a place like Tennessee. But when you look around at the other coaching names that might come available, I think Dan Mullen to Tennessee fits better than most. I think this is such an interesting kind of coaching carousel that we're dealing with right now because it's almost like NFL free agency. Like at the top, you're waiting for the top dominoes to fall. You're waiting to see where Chip Kelly goes and who Florida's going to hire, and then everything else starts to fall into place. I can't remember ever really so many things hinging on a couple of different things. Chip Kelly to me, and then what is Gus Malzahn going to do after the Iron Bowl this weekend? Is Auburn going to win that game? I think once those things start to fall into place, then everything else kind of falls in behind it. But if Tennessee lands Dan Mullen, I think it's a great hire in my opinion.
Let me hit a couple of the comments here on this that are coming in. Terry Whitehead, Mullen says they're going to fire him if he doesn't do better than he did at Mississippi State. Here's the thing about that, though. I think it's difficult to judge how Mullen performed at Mississippi State, which has fewer resources available to it than Tennessee does, and say that's the record he might have at Tennessee. The fact of the matter is Mullen's performed better as Mississippi State's coach than almost anybody else could under the same circumstances. Remember this. The best judge for how Mullen's done at Mississippi State is the fact that he's been picked to finish last in the SEC West virtually every single year at SEC Media Days. The fact that he never does that, to me, is the sort of number one feather in his cap as a coach. He always exceeds expectations at Mississippi State. If he can do that in Starkville, he could do the same kind of stuff in Knoxville, probably even more so because Tennessee just a more historically rich and more resourced program.
Right. Tennessee has the higher ceiling. Listen, I'm going to take a page out of your book when you talk about this. I think to get the pulse on how you should feel about Dan Mullen as a head coach is ask Mississippi State how many Mississippi State fans want him to leave.
That's great.
There's none.
Great.
There's none. So I think when you look at it from that angle, you kind of get a feel for what he's done at Mississippi State and how special it's been. There's a ceiling on what you can do at Mississippi State, in my opinion. They haven't reached the heights that some of the other programs in the SEC definitely haven't reached the heights that Tennessee's gotten to. And I think for that reason, you would have to think an upward trajectory if Dan Mullen lands that job.
A lot of similar comments coming in. Casey Mooningham says Mullen is happy in Stark Vegas. Let's quit the guessing passing game here about him going somewhere else. Scott Jordan says the same thing. Mullen's not going anywhere. Brian Wallace says Mullen hasn't made it state. He'd be insane to make a move right now. Here's the problem, though. While Mississippi State, to your point, fans are very happy with Dan Mullen because of how much he's winning. At a certain point in time, in almost any program, you kind of bump into the ceiling. And at that point in time, fans do get restless. This satisfaction that Mississippi State fans have with Mullen is not the kind of thing that's just going to last forever. You can't stay at that job making $4 million a year for year after year after year if you're kind of continuing to win at the pace you're winning right now, a couple top 25 seasons, maybe just missing the top 25. That's great for a while, but even Mississippi State fans are going to get tired of that eventually. So I think there's an idea in Mullen's head of you've got to move along before they come calling for you, because eventually all SEC fans grow tired of it if you're not winning at the highest level, winning more this year than you won last year.
There's been very rarely, if any, head coaches that have ridden off into the sunset on their own accord. And listen, we're hearing from all these people. Michael Ryan Wood in the comment section, SEC country is just begging for attention here. Listen, I think if you're a Mississippi State fan, I understand it. You don't want Dan Mullen to go anywhere. He's reached new heights for Mississippi State. He's become nationally relevant. When you talk about what he's done this year, specifically in the polls, the only 3 losses to top 7 teams in the country. But I think if you think that Dan Mullen's going to stay at Mississippi State for 30 years, you're kind of joking yourself. Not only that, I don't think Mississippi State fans will want him in 30 years. So at some point, the guy's probably going to exit the program. I don't know if this is going to be the year, but I just don't see him as being one of those 20-year guys at Mississippi State.
Amy Hill-Pay says, have you not heard Dan Mullen say how happy he is in Starkville and he's not leaving? I've heard the one, I haven't heard the other. I've definitely heard him say that he's happy in Starkville. I heard his wife say that. We played that audio here on AT&T SEC Country Live. What I have not explicitly heard him say that he's never leaving. I haven't heard him say that at all. I've heard him sort of sidestep some of the rumors, but there is no confirmation here that Mullen, whose name has come up for jobs over and over again, and you're kidding yourself if you think that some of that didn't come from his own camp, we've heard no confirmation that he won't take any other job.
Yeah, and he is, listen, if Dan Mullen wanted to stay at Starkville, say, listen, sign me to a lifetime contract, I'm going to be here forever. It's definitely some of his own camp that's putting it out. And it's like I said, I'm not saying that Dan Mullen won't stay at Mississippi State. I just think that if you think it's not okay for anybody to even talk about the fact that he might leave, I think you're kidding yourself if you're a Mississippi State fan.
By the way, you want to talk about the special day that Thanksgiving is? Here's how special it is. Cliff Nelson, Jeremy Pettis, an LSU fan, Alabama fan, they go at each other in the throats every single day. Already, we're like 5 minutes into the show. They've already wished each other a happy Thanksgiving.
I love it.
That right there is the power of Thanksgiving, to bring warring factions together like nothing else can around the SEC.
That's the power of the SEC Country Live, right?
That's exactly right.
In, man.
That's exactly right. So we'll talk more about this subject and all subjects throughout the program, including taking plenty of your comments on the way here as well. For now, though, let's move on to item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Obviously, the Iron Bowl, a big topic of conversation on Saturday. The winner of that great rivalry game goes on to play Georgia in the SEC Championship. But on Tuesday night, Gus Malzahn, the Auburn coach, was on the ESPN show around the college football playoff rankings. And boy, I got to tell you, he was asked a really interesting question. Do you remember a few weeks ago, coming off the Auburn loss to LSU, he said, hey, the sky's not falling, this is not the end of the world. And at the time, and I think we even talked about this in the show, Mike, I really felt like that comment seemed almost out of touch. Like, this is a guy that doesn't appreciate how much those Auburn fans wanted to win that LSU game. But as it turns out, he was prophetic. It wasn't the end of the world. The sky was not falling. Auburn did kind of right the ship after that game. And this week on ESPN, he was asked, how exactly did he and his team do it? And I thought that Gus Malzahn gave a pretty interesting answer. Take a listen to this.
We were facing major adversity at the time, and you either fold your tent or you roll your sleeves up, and our team did that. And we've been in the playoffs ever since that game, must-win situations. And here we are 4 or 5 weeks later, and we're playing for the SEC West Championship. I'm very proud of our team, the way they got us here.
So I'm not kidding about this. I know that Gus Malzahn is kind of one of these hot and cold type guys where Auburn fans seem to like him one week, seem not like him the next week. Maybe he's going to Arkansas. Maybe he's getting fired. I really mean this. I think that Malzahn ought to get a lot more credit for how this Auburn season is finishing up than he probably is. Now, it's going to be judged based on what happened in the Alabama game. I get that.
Yep.
But to the extent that you can evaluate this stuff before the end of the season, Auburn has turned itself into a really good team. And after the LSU game, I don't know that anyone thought that they would. There were some people jumping off that ship, jumping off that bandwagon. After the Clemson game, people were mocking me for saying they could win the SEC West. When you look at how they handled LSU and the loss that came there, when you look at what came because of that, I think Malzahn's done a really good job with this team. It should probably get some credit for it.
Listen, I was kind of confused as to which way I was going to go with this when we talked about this topic on the show. But it's Iron Bowl week, so I'm going to do it anyways. I think he deserves credit in the way that if you're fat and you lose weight, you should deserve credit. He did this to himself. Like, this is not nobody else did this to Gus Malzahn. It's not like he's dealing with injuries or dealing with a bunch of transfers or dealing with a signing class that wasn't good. He did this to himself. And so when I look at Auburn's team, as loaded as they are, the caliber of team that they have, the fact that they were highly favored in that game against LSU, it's hard for me to give the guy credit, because I look at that game and I'm thinking, if this were the BCS era, that game knocks them out of playoff. It knocks them out of contention, really, to go to the BCS championship. And yet here we are sitting about, giving him credit. And listen, I agree with you. He kept kind of this train on the tracks. Was able to get his players to really gain focus. But I've said it on the show a million times. The best teams are the ones that don't have to lose to turn that corner. If you can do that, if you can learn your lessons in a winning mode, that's when you get the great football teams. I hate the fact that they had to lose to get it there and to get their season pointed back in the right direction. Yes, he deserves some credit, but he did it to himself is the reason I have struggled with it.
Tyler Mann says the criticism Gus gets is a little unfair in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, he does deserve some of it, but they're number 6 in the country, have an 8-2 record, and people still want him to get fired. I hope he goes to Arkansas, and then Auburn can't find a decent head coach, and that may very well happen. But you talk about the LSU loss. Here's what's kind of unfair about that, at least in my opinion, in terms of your evaluation of it. SEC games are just hard to win, right? You go on the road to LSU. Even at the time, it sort of seemed like this sort of like fait accompli that Auburn was going to break its losing streak in Death Valley. Hadn't won there since 1999. But even in a year where Auburn had everything to play for, LSU appearingly had not as much to play for, it's still a tough game to win.
Yeah.
And the wins after that are tough to come by either. I can tell you from being in Jordan-Hare Stadium with the Georgia game, that was a focused team. And maybe part of my evaluation of Malzahn here comes from wanting my preseason prediction to be right or wanting to feel better about how they beat up on Georgia. But the truth is, he's got this bunch playing pretty hard right now.
I agree with you. And listen, I think Auburn's one of the scariest teams in the country. I think when you look at the top 10 or even really the top 25, Auburn might be the last team you want to run into right now. They're playing at such a high level. I just hate the fact that it took a loss to get them there. It's like, we're going to give the guy credit for turning the corner. It's almost like you got to give Barry Odom credit for turning the corner, but it's like, why didn't they play like that all year if Missouri had the capability of playing to that level? It just, to me, it kind of sticks out. And I think you'll hear the same thing from a lot of Auburn fans. They're probably, it's Iron Bowl week. Nobody's going to really love what anybody from Alabama has to say about it. But when you get to the end of it, if they do lose this game against Alabama, I think a lot of Auburn fans are going to feel the same way. Why do we have 3 losses with such a talented team?
I agree with you on that. And James Harn says that Malzahn's going to get embarrassed in the Iron Bowl. And if that does happen, then this whole conversation is moot. We're having a discussion right now, a couple days before the Iron Bowl. But ultimately, Malzahn's brought to Auburn to beat Alabama. And while I can give you credit for navigating the waters after the loss to LSU, the ultimate thing you get credit for and the ultimate thing you're judged on, and I agree with you on this, is either beat Alabama or don't.
Right.
And there are no mitigating factors. There are no mitigating circumstances. You brought in the transfer quarterback, you changed the offensive coordinator, you did all that kind of stuff. So I agree with you. Auburn's not some, David against the Goliath of Alabama.
Yes.
At least they're not supposed to be. This is a game they've been preparing to win here, and so that's ultimately the way that Malzahn's going to be judged. You're right about that.
This isn't some kind of perennial underdog program where you're supposed to do more with less. Auburn is Auburn. They're a very good football team, a very good program, and they have. Listen, how many times have we talked about recruiting rosters and recruiting ability and able to get those 5 stars? That's what Auburn has right now. They got a 5-star quarterback, a ton of credit, to go to that backfield and that offensive line. And I guess it's kind of a credit coming out of my mouth that I expect a ton from Auburn, expect a ton from this football team and from Gus Malzahn.
Steve Weaver says he's drinking bourbon and smoking turkeys. That sounds like a pretty good Wednesday right there, Steve.
Our guy Cliff,
checking on AT&T SEC Country Live today.
Our guy Cliff Nelson's in the comment section giving out marination secrets and how he's cooking turkeys and cooking them up. So
glad y'all are having fun, and thanks for being here with us on the program today. Let me move on here to item number 3 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So we're going to try to sort of lay out the laundry list of all the rumors involving Chip Kelly. The first one may be the most interesting of all for me, and it comes from Pat Forty from Yahoo Sports. Let me show you this on the screen here of what Forty has written about the Chip Kelly situation. He says Florida officials are engaged with Kelly about becoming the next coach, but the school is preparing to widen its search, multiple sources told Yahoo. Kelly's the school's top candidate. He's taken time to engage in a deliberate evaluation of Florida, but with potential candidates becoming available, Florida appears to be ready to move on after Thanksgiving if a deal is not struck with Kelly. Now, this could be posturing. There's a chance that this is posturing, and they leaked that to Pat Forty to sort of give themselves an out in case Kelly tries to drag his feet more on the situation. But you know what I've been saying. I think when it's all said and done, Florida's not going to hire Chip Kelly because I think it's going to believe it can find a better coach different from Chip Kelly. What do you make of what 40 writes here?
I agree with what you first said. I think it's posturing. I think when you look at the Chip Kelly situation, a lot of reports have come out and said that his name's already on the paper. You know, that the ink has already been laid down, but gave himself a little bit of outlet before Sunday gets here that possibly another job does come open and he wants to move on. I think that when Florida looks at it and maybe they're calling his agent saying, where's Chip at? Oh, he's on a plane over to talk to the UCLA people out in LA. Well, you know what? We're going to leak a report that says that maybe he's not our guy. Maybe we're prepared to move on. I think this is a done deal in my opinion, and I think when Sunday gets here, you're going to have Chip Kelly as the head coach at Florida, and I don't think it's that big a secret. I think it's posturing from both sides right now. Maybe there's some money getting switched around for assistant coaches, but from everything I've heard and everything I've read about Florida right now, they're vetting assistant coaches for Chip Kelly. They're not even talking to Chip so much as just waiting on this weekend's game to be over.
Bo Molinari, and Texas A&M fan, says Chip Kelly needs to go to UCLA. He's going to get beat up in the SEC. Ironic about that is maybe A&M's one of those schools that might consider Chip Kelly. At least there's a thought there is. But that's kind of more in line with my thought process here. And I hate to sound like the ultimate SEC homer, but I don't think that Kelly's a good fit for an SEC program like Florida. There are some spots where he might be an okay fit. I don't think Florida's that school. I agree with Bo Molinari on that, but you have been much higher on the proposition of Kelly to Florida than I have been this entire time.
I just think it's exciting. I think when you talk to Florida fans, I think it's exciting to see what Chip Kelly could possibly do with some of the athletes you're going to have at Florida. The athletes are going to have at Florida are incredible. They always have athletes, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. So I think when you start to marry these two things, the only really concerns you have is what is Chip Kelly as a head coach? Is he going to be a weird head coach? What is he going to be on the recruiting trail? I think that him winning is going to soothe any thoughts about him being a weird guy. And Florida, in my opinion, recruits itself a lot of the time. So I think you get him in there, you get them running a good offense. I think they're a scary team if they hire Chip Kelly.
Rick Keene, who is watching the show today, says Pat Dooley, the longtime Florida reporter down for the Gainesville Sun, is reporting that the deal is not done. Dooley has been saying that for a while. I haven't seen his most latest report on that. Apparently, he said something like that on a podcast, and Dooley's been saying that for a while. And if anybody knows, it's like the old venerable reporter. I mean, he's as close to this situation as any. So I'm going to take him serious on that.
Well, I think you should, and I know there's reports to me in every different direction out there about Chip Kelly right now. And here's what we know: that obviously, everybody from Gainesville was in New Hampshire, and at some point they had a meeting. So I have to believe that it's coming around the corner.
What do you make about Chip Kelly, apparently, according to George Schroeder from USA Today, turning down the Tennessee job? He was offered the Tennessee job and turned it down. What do you make of that?
I don't know that he was offered it. In my opinion, if you look at that situation, I don't think Chip Kelly's a good fit at all at Tennessee. I think they've got enough problems going on in that athletic department that maybe, here's the way that I kind of see this playing out. John Curry gets on the phone, calls Chip Kelly's agent, hey, would you even think about coming to Tennessee? No. Okay, well, thanks. That's just all I wanted to know. It's like, hey, we're waiting on our guy right now, but I just want to call and see what we have in Chip Kelly. And to me, if I have my guess, that was the extent of the conversation.
Here's the thing, then. I'm going to say this really, really quick here because I don't want to make the topic about Tennessee. We've been talking about Florida. If Tennessee's even reaching out to Chip Kelly, then the John Gruden stuff is BS from the start. I mean, can we not agree with that? That you're either getting down the road with Gruden or you're not. If you're getting down the road with Gruden, you're not calling Chip Kelly at all. What is John Curry, the Tennessee AD, doing, allowing these Gruden rumors to fester when he's on the phone with Chip Kelly? I mean, how many haymakers are you going to throw here? I think Kelly would be a better fit for Tennessee than you do. In a weird way, I just think he's a better fit for Tennessee than Florida. I don't have time to explain all my reasoning on that. But it's weird that they would go down the Kelly road, as Schroeder reports, if that's true, and allow the Gruden stuff to be out there. It just makes Curry seem like he's just, I don't know, pawing around in the dark.
Well, I think this has been, in my opinion, it's been booster driven from the beginning. This is, something that obviously kind of nested in the fan base, and I think it's led to a lot of the boosters kind of wanting. And listen, John Curry is still the new guy on the block in terms of being a Tennessee AD. This is kind of the first time he's done this at Tennessee, so he probably has all those boosters coming in his office going, hey, have you talked to John Gruden? Hey, have you talked to John Gruden? He's probably like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to talk to him, but right now I need to look at seriously hiring a different coach. I don't know that John Curry, in my opinion, ever really gave a ton of consideration to John Gruden.
Let me remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Of course, my name is Brandon Adams, and that's Mike Johnson. It's great to have you with us here on the program today. And don't forget, coming up next Friday, it's a little more than a week from right now, a very special event, a special broadcast of AT&T SEC Country Live taking place, Hooters, downtown Atlanta, the night before the big championship game on Saturday. Please make sure you come by and see us there for that, whether you're a fan of the Georgia Bulldogs, the team in the game, Alabama fans, Auburn fans, whichever one of your schools makes it into the game, come on by and see us there that night. Or if you can get to Atlanta for our event event that Friday night anywhere close, we'd love to see you. Starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Hooters on Peachtree Street, downtown Atlanta, the night before the big SEC championship. That's going to be a lot of fun. And by the way, speaking of Hooters, they've got a great offer right now for SEC fans. You can get $5 off your online to-go order of $25 or more. But you got to go to Hooters.com, order online, and make sure you use the promo code SECFans for that. Coming up in just a moment, we're going to take a look at the weekend's worth of action in the SEC from a point spread perspective. Before we do that, though, let's take a look at item number 4 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And Kirk Herbstreit, the ESPN analyst, gave an interview to Seth Emerson from DogNation.com. That's the site in our family of websites that covers the Georgia Bulldogs. And Herbstreit dropped a pretty strong opinion about who Georgia doesn't want to play in the SEC championship. As we said, we know the Iron Bowl is going to decide the direction that championship game goes, and Herbstreit thinks that Georgia should hope it's not Alabama. Here's the reasoning Herbstreit gave to DogNation.com. He says, with Alabama, Nick Saban, his team so programmed to get to Atlanta, there'll be familiarity there because of Nick and Kirby. I think it would be a whole different animal there trying to take on Alabama. I think personally I would want Auburn there. As a guy who played for Nick Saban in Alabama, do you agree that the experience that Bama has in championship games makes it a more difficult opponent for Georgia than Auburn, who hasn't been there as much under Gus Malzahn?
I can tell you right now, a lot of people brush this off. It's a big factor. I mean, and I told you this story earlier today on your Dog Nation podcast that when we went to this title game in 2008, we were 12-0, we were number 1 in the country. We were kind of in awe. It was almost like we didn't know what to expect. We're over there playing the Florida Gators, who were the defending, not the defending national champions, but obviously had the defending Heisman Trophy winner Tim Tebow that year, and would go on to win a national championship. And it was kind of like, hey, we step in here, and all of a sudden we're on the national scene. It's number 1 versus number 2 game, an incredible build-up for that matchup, and it was a little bit over our heads. I think when we returned the next year and had that rematch in 2009, we felt way more comfortable to be in that area, be in that stadium, go to Atlanta. We knew what we were getting into. We had played this team before, and I'm not saying that's what will possibly win the game if Bama and Georgia do match up. I'm just saying it is one factor that's in Alabama's corner when you look at that matchup. Also, you look at the fact that they have already played in that stadium this year in Mercedes-Benz against FSU. I have to agree in some ways with what Kirk Herbstreit was trying to say.
All right, so a lot of folks in the comment section weighing in on this. James Harn says, doesn't matter. Dog is going to give him hell. Trip Davidson says, I want another shot at Auburn. So you have a lot of Georgia fans weighing in on this. Some Georgia fans do want that rematch against Auburn, revenge for the bad blowout that Auburn dealt to the Dogs a couple of weeks ago. But in general, I kind of agree with you that being in the same spot every year, even though it's a new stadium this year, that institutional memory, that institutional knowledge, I think it does just have to help Alabama a little bit. I guess my question would be, is there anything that Kirby Smart can do, given the fact that as an assistant coach, he coached in a lot of these games? Can he instill some of that knowledge into Georgia, even though the players themselves haven't been there?
Well, I think there's going to be a little familiarity. Listen, Georgia's playing in Atlanta this weekend, so there's back-to-back trips over to the big city down from Athens. And Kirby Smart's been there. You're right. This is sometimes when you lean on leadership and you point out, certain procedural things that leaders can talk to their team about. Well, now it's Kirby Smart's chance. And it's not going to be anything really you can look at and point to. It's going to be stuff like, times of getting on the buses or what hotel you're staying at or maybe getting them to the stadium early on Friday so they can walk around. Kirby Smart's been there. He's seen these games. He's been a part of these big SEC title games that not anybody on Georgia's roster has been to. So I think there is a little bit in his corner where some of that can wear off. And listen, if they are rematching against Auburn, I would not be shocked if Kirby Smart calls Nick Saban and asks for a little bit of advice.
That's a really interesting idea, a really interesting point of view. But you mentioned the fact that Georgia's playing in Atlanta this weekend against Georgia Tech. And while knuckleheads like us talk about who Georgia should be wanting to play in the SEC championship, Kirby Smart said this week that his attention is fully focused on this game this Saturday against the Yellow Jackets. Here's Kirby to explain.
Georgia Tech has got our undivided attention. They're very hard to prepare for. It's hard to simulate what they do, and it's not normal for us. So we're having to play a lot of calls that we don't typically play. So it's tough, but it is what it is. They do what they do for a reason. They run the ball well, but as far as the SEC championship, we have to worry about that come Saturday night, Sunday.
I mean, in a weird way, the fact that Georgia's playing a team on Saturday that it lost to a year ago, an in-state rival, I think it probably makes it a little easier to keep the focus on Georgia Tech for this game. I take Kirby at his word there when he says he and his players aren't looking into the SEC championship at all because there's a lot on the line in terms of a bragging rights situation for Georgia against Georgia Tech.
I completely agree. This is one of those games where you go in there and a lot of people are angry about how that game ended last year. Go in there and deal with business. I think that it's nice for Georgia right now that they have a senior-laden team. You can look at the team and say, you know what, they haven't been in this position in quite a while. None of these guys on the roster, but they have a senior-laden team that it's absolutely hungry, and I think they'll start to get these boys pointing in the right direction. It's a big game. It's almost lucky to have a rivalry game on the last day of the week, the last last game of the season because you know what? You're not going to really yawn and just kind of sleepwalk into that one. I don't think anybody on that roster is looking forward to Atlanta yet.
All right, let's get ready to a transition here. Speaking of that Georgia Tech game, let's talk about that and some of the other games around the SEC this week from a point spread perspective. We do this every week. It's our MyBookie best bets. Of course, you can check out MyBookie at mybookie.ag. Now, we got a lot of games here. Let's run through as many of these as we can, as quickly as we can. Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Mississippi State a 16-point favorite. Bulldogs did not cover the number last week against Arkansas. I think Ole Miss keeps it closer here as well. I'm going to take Ole Miss plus the 16.
I'm going with Mississippi State. I think they
cover a big number in a rivalry game.
I think they've been
your first weekend around college football.
Listen, I think they've been incredibly tough in these home games. I think when we really have seen Mississippi State hiccup, other than non-conference games, have been on the road. I think when you look at the way they played Alabama at home, the way they played LSU at home, I think they're going to have that same mentality against Ole Miss this weekend.
Missouri, Arkansas. I know Missouri's like the hottest team in the SEC right now. Arkansas played close against Mississippi State. I feel like it's a little too much for Missouri, though. I'm going to take a flyer here on the Hogs on just the basis of a wild guess.
Yeah, I'm going to go the opposite direction as well.
Missouri, I don't have a lot to back up my opinion.
Missouri's been a covering machine the second half of the year, and they've come out and they've put points up on everybody. Arkansas's defense, in my opinion, if Missouri plays their game, Arkansas's defense is not good enough to stop the bleeding from Missouri.
Georgia, I'm going to take them minus the 11. You agree with that?
I think that's a safe bet. I think when you look at this front seven, there's just too much talent and speed on the front seven for Georgia to not really be able to attack Georgia Tech's offense.
Who is Florida State to be a 5-point favorite against anybody?
I don't know.
I mean, Florida's terrible, but who are the Seminoles to be a 5-point favorite on the road against anybody?
On the road in the swamp, the Seminoles right now, not a very good football team. By the way, they might be looking towards next week against Louisiana Monroe. They have a game next weekend. Florida State does. So it's intriguing to look at that line.
To Louisiana Monroe.
It's intriguing to look at that line and see Florida State as a 5-point favorite on the road. But I'm going to go with Florida State. Florida has shown me nothing in the weeks after Jim McElwain's firing that says they'll win this game.
Louisville got beat by Kentucky last year. I'm guessing they're very motivated this week, and this could be a bloodbath.
This could be a bloodbath in Louisville's favor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I think when you look at Lamar Jackson, his numbers are almost better than they were in his Heisman campaign. He's going to be too much speed, too much athleticism for Kentucky to cover.
And then when it comes to the Iron Bowl, I hate to do it. This is not a disrespectful thing towards you. I obviously love you as a partner here on AT&T SEC Country Live, but I got to go Auburn here. I said it before the start of the season. They're going to beat Alabama. I believe that still right now.
Yeah.
I'm more confident in my pick than ever. I think that Jarrett Stidham outplays Jalen Hurts and Auburn gets this win on Saturday.
I think that's an okay pick. Obviously, man, you know me. Roll Tide, man. I got to go with Alabama in this one. I think there's a lot to be said about what Alabama is as a team. I think they're going to get the win.
Daniel Beard asked which channel the Florida State-Florida game's on. Is it Comedy Central? Yeah, that's a good line, Daniel. First of all,
like Fox Business or something.
Yeah, Comedy Central may be the place those two teams are playing in this year. Let's run through the rest of these here really quick. The rest of the rivalry games. Vanderbilt, Tennessee. Neither of these teams have won the SEC. Once again, who's Tennessee to be a favorite? I have no idea. But you and I both the same way on this. We think South Carolina keeps it close against Clemson on Saturday.
I do. How many times have we said this year, anytime you have Jake Finley, you have a fighting chance. I just think this game being on home turf, South Carolina got embarrassed in this game last year. I don't know if Clemson's as good. 14 points is just a touch too much for me.
I'm going favorite in the LSU Texas A&M game. You going favorite there minus a sizable number?
I don't know. I think I might lean to Texas A&M in this game. I think that LSU is a good football team, but by no means have they really been blowing anybody out. I think they've been covering the line a couple times, but Texas A&M is still pretty good.
And do you have a lean in that Tennessee Vanderbilt game?
No, I don't. It's such a cop out. Yeah, it's such a cop out to say that. But what do you know? What are you going to get from either one of these teams? Neither one of them have won an SEC game. It's just such a toss-up.
A lot of you know more about this than we do. A lot of you can make better picks than we can. So you have a chance to put your money where your mouth is and play with the pros play at mybookie.ag. Holiday time of year, money going out of your pocket on gifts and parties, and this weekend especially, all the food. Turkeys are expensive. You got to put some money back in your pocket. That's why you want to get involved in the point spreads, the over-unders, the money lines, all there for you at mybookie.ag. And right now, well, they got a special offer for SEC Country Live viewers. You're going to use the promo code.
It's been a long week.
I tell you what, I'd never make that. I have a lot of different shows, and I almost did the wrong show. But nonetheless, SEC Country Live viewers, MyBookie's got a very special offer for you. It's the promo code SEC Live. You can get your first deposit matched up to 50%. But you got to go right now. SEC Live, the promo code. MyBookie.ag, the website. You can get your first deposit matched up to 50%. All right, let's go back into our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list here. And I guess somewhere there must be some Arkansas fans pining for return of the old coach, Bobby Petrino. Petrino's name has obviously surfaced as a potential replacement for Gus Malzahn at Auburn, for Butch Jones at Tennessee. He's been kind of floating around SEC circles, and I guess there must be some Arkansas fans who are saying, how about bringing Petrino back here? We already know he can win. He was winning at a very high level before. the infamous motorcycle incident that got him fired there. Well, Dari Noka was on the very good Bo Mattingly radio show in the state of Arkansas, and Dari Noka, the SEC network host, had a bit of a scolding to give to any Arkansas fan who wants Petrino to come back. Here's how Noka chastised the Hogs fans.
It's coming across to me as a fan base who wants to win at every single cost imaginable. Arkansas fans, my fear is that if Bobby Petrino said, I want to come back to Fayetteville, he'd be there tomorrow. Tomorrow, if it was up to Arkansas fans. Does character mean anything? And I realize he won a lot of games. I realize there are other coaches that could win a lot of games. I don't know who they are because, as you said, it is a total crapshoot. But they're there, and they can be the right person to lead your university and win football games.
So here's my response to Dari Noka here. I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish by kind of joining him and saying, hey, character should matter. Here's my explanation for why I think it should. I mean, the truth is, I'm like every other SEC fan. I want to win too. You know, and like whatever it takes to win, I kind of want to do it as long as it's kind of within the boundaries of the rule book and the laws especially. But ultimately, you want to win. But an absence of character from your head coach ultimately makes winning harder to do. Yeah. And in Arkansas, if you sort of factor in the long run here, average out the wins that you got under Bobby Petrino, the losses that you took once he had to be fired, and he had to be fired after he got caught on a motorcycle with some gal that wasn't his wife, you sort of factor all that in together and you realize that choosing an absence of character makes winning more difficult to do. So I think that Dari Noka is actually making a pretty good point, even though it sounds like sort of Mr. Egghead Ivory Tower guy saying you guys need to stop worrying about winning and start worrying about character. An absence of character makes winning more difficult.
I'm gonna attack this from a different angle than you did, because I agree with everything you just said, and I think you have to have some character in there. I think you have to walk a fine line. Obviously, Louisville has kind of gotten bitten from walking that fine line with some of the things that have gone on with that program. That's probably one of the bigger reasons that Petrino's name keeps coming up when you look at the situation in the Louisville athletic department. My thing that I think when I hear this, what Dari Noka had to say, I think he has to be careful. I think it's a little bit reckless of him to go out and say Arkansas fans feel this way, because I just don't. From the Arkansas fans that have been in our comment section, I don't think they feel that way. Mm-hmm. I think that maybe he's talking to 2 or 3 Arkansas fans or has read something on Twitter that think, oh yeah, we want Petrino back. But it's the same amount of the faction to me when you talk to Tennessee fans that would love to have Lane Kiffin back. I think it's like 80% of the fans at Tennessee are like, we would never want Lane Kiffin back, but there's still 20% that are like, you know what, we'd love to have him back if he can win. I don't see that from Arkansas fans. Maybe I'm just misreading the situation. I just haven't gotten that feeling.
I think that's probably a pretty fair point. The faction of Arkansas fans even calling for Petrino is not that great. Yeah. The reason why I believe I know that's true is because the majority of Arkansas fans, I mean, I can tell from our comment section when we talk about the subject, the majority of the Arkansas fans are excited about Gus Malzahn.
Yep.
Which, by the way, Auburn fans, maybe you need to realize what you have in terms of him as a coach. Maybe that's for you to decide. But that's who Arkansas fans want. They want Malzahn. They believe Malzahn's coming. At least a lot of them do. So you're right when you said there's not a lot of Petrino talk, because the conversation is more taken over by the desire for Malzahn.
It's like when I saw his comments, I was like, who's he been talking to? I mean, maybe it's misleading, the ones we've seen in our comment section, but I haven't gotten that feeling from Arkansas fans. A lot of talk about Gus Malzahn, and I think the reason that Arkansas fans would be high on either one of these guys is because they're tired of kind of the offense they've seen out of the Brett Bielema regime. You look at Gus Malzahn or Bobby Petrino, offensively, a step up from what you've been seeing. So I think a lot of those Arkansas fans are probably going to be excited either way. But I haven't seen a lot of Arkansas fans that have been shouting about Bobby Petrino. It's been about Gus Malzahn or getting somebody else in there, but I just think a little bit reckless on the part of Dari Noka.
Yeah, Ashley Wade agrees with that. She says that Petrino would be a reckless hire, or what Dari Noka says, but Petrino himself may be also a reckless coach. Yeah. Well, we can agree on that.
Yeah. He's not reckless. He's been wrecking motorcycles.
Yeah, he is wrecked. Both wrecked and reckless may be the case with Bobby Petrino, who is probably legitimately just not a good guy. Let me move on to item number 6 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And speaking of Gus Malzahn, the Auburn coach, Andy Staples, SI.com, apparently thinks that Malzahn is not going anywhere from Auburn. Here is what Staples said recently, making an appearance on the Paul Feinbaum show. He says, looking at that roster coming back to Auburn next year, the team can win a lot of games. Staples apparently doesn't expect Malzahn to be involved in the coaching carousel this offseason. We said this yesterday, not on the basis of any kind of sourcing, but just sometimes all you got to do is understand human nature. And in the case of Malzahn, this is the case. If he is given a chance to stay at Auburn, now if he loses to Alabama, he may not get that chance, but if he's given a chance to stay at Auburn, I believe he will choose to do that, because ultimately, even if the quality of life is better for you somewhere else, they'll tolerate a less successful season, and Arkansas almost certainly would in comparison to Auburn. Still, there is something in people who choose to compete that never wants to stop competing. Coaches coach, and coaches that coach want to coach for championships, which you can do at Auburn. I don't think Malzahn could pull himself away from this job.
I don't think he could either. And listen, I think that Andy Staples kind of hits the nail on the head because I look at it from my own perspective, and I would be kind of shocked if he did go to Arkansas. And it's been a fun talking point, and I know that Arkansas fans would love it. And there is a piece of me that looks at Gus Malzahn and think, man, maybe there's too much pressure. Maybe he wants to go to some place where there's lower expectations. But when you look at what he's done this year, and I'm going to go on record and say Gus Malzahn, no matter what happens this weekend, should be allowed to keep his job at Auburn. I mean, you're going to tell me that you lose the 2 number 1 teams in the country and the number 18 team in the country, and then you got to get fired and you have to move on from that. You're getting kicked out. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think he'd be a great hire for Arkansas, but I think just from my own opinion, I'd be shocked if it happened. And so I have to agree with Andy Staples there.
Jeffrey Payne says Gus will keep his job if he beats Alabama, which is different what you just said. You think Gus can keep his job now no matter what. I think you're probably right, but to go back to Jeffrey's sort of viewpoint in the comment section, here's the tough thing if you're Auburn. If you lose to Alabama again, there's a chance Jarrett Stidham goes to the NFL after this season.
Yeah.
It's a good roster for Auburn next season, but it may be like Malik Willis, who was just a 3-star prospect coming out of high school at quarterback, and not the former 5-star Jarrett Stidham. That may be the case for Auburn next season. How can you convince yourself, how can you convince Auburn fans that they're getting closer to Alabama if Alabama keeps right on rolling and Auburn sort of stays status quo after losing the Iron Bowl again? I think that Malzahn's done a good job up to this point in the season. But if it's a loss at home to Alabama again, with Alabama banged up and injured, Auburn kind of riding high right now, I mean, how do you sell status quo after this season? It's probably the right thing to do, but it's just a very tough sort of sales pitch to make.
I understand that, and Auburn fans aren't going to like what I have to say about this, but the toughest job in America to me is coaching at Auburn during the Nick Saban tenure. Yeah. I mean, you're just not going to come out on the positive side. Not a lot of people have a winning record against Nick Saban, if any, when you talk about some of the head coaches out there. And so I understand the resentment from some of the Auburn fans that say we really want to get over the hump, but it's an incredibly tough task. And I just don't see a coach out there right now that I think you're going to plug in and is all of a sudden going to beat Nick Saban the next few years. I don't think that guy is available right now. I mean, you could try to throw money at Jimbo Fisher possibly. You could look at a guy like Chris Peterson up at Washington, but I just don't see anybody better out there that I feel better about than Gus Malzahn in that spot.
That's why I think that Jarrett Stidham is such a crucial figure in this Iron Bowl this year.
Yeah.
Now, Alabama fans will come back to me all the time and say, hey, Alabama doesn't need Jalen Hurts to be an all-world quarterback to win the Iron Bowl, win the national championship. They've criticized me for my criticism of Jalen Hurts. We'll debate if that's true or not on another day. Auburn needs Jarrett Stidham on Saturday.
Yeah, they definitely
They need a huge game from Stidham. And he's not the most important offensive player. In a lot of ways, that's Kerryon Johnson. But against Alabama, you just can't let Kerryon Johnson run wild. It's the threat of the deep throws that opens up the running game here. I mean, Stidham in terms of how Malzahn's perceived going forward, how the Auburn program's perceived going forward. I mean, he is the most important player in the SEC this weekend because he is a quarterback capable of beating Alabama. And if he doesn't, boy, it's going to be low morale on the plane.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think that when you look at Jarrett Stidham, you look at this offense, obviously Kerryon Johnson is the catalyst right now. You want him to go up over 100 yards, and a lot of people think Alabama's run defense is as weak as it has been in some time, so I think he'll get every opportunity to do that. But you have to have that balance, and you have to have the ability to beat Alabama through the air. There's hardly any teams that have beaten a Nick Saban team on the ground. It just doesn't happen a lot. He's going to find a way to beat up those running games from other schools. Jarrett Stidham, you're right. He's one of the most important figures in college football this weekend. He has to be able to get it done.
Cliff Nelson says the reason why the Alabama folks don't want to talk about Hurts, he says that's because Hurts is terrible, BA. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. So Cliff Nelson's been kind of on my side about this in the comments section all season long. We'll find out on Saturday who's right. The Bama backers who've been on Hurts the whole time or the folks who've been pretty impressed with Jarrett Stidham.
He's 24-1 in his college career, so I mean, at some point you got to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm not saying the guy's a world beater, but he's been pretty good for Alabama.
That is Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. Thanks for being with us today on our last day before Thanksgiving on AT&T SEC Country Live. I'll remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Also, next Friday, very special edition of our program, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, the Hooters downtown Atlanta on Peachtree Street. If you'd like to watch our show on Facebook Live, we'd love to have you join us in person for that. One of the first real events we've done here since AT&T SEC Country Live has gotten going. So we'd love to see you there the night before the big championship game on Saturday. And, of course, speaking of Hooters, they've got a great offer right now for SEC fans. It's $5 off your order of $25 or more but it's got to be on to-go orders placed online. So go to Hooters.com to do that. Make sure you use the promo code SECFans. Use that promo code. You can get $5 off your online to-go order of $25 or more right there at Hooters.com. All right, let me dive back in here to item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And speaking of Chip Kelly, apparently there is a third team emerging as a potential choice for Kelly. We know about Florida. We know about UCLA. Who is this third team? Let me show you on the internet what's being said about that right now. We'll give you the quote here on this. Scott Roussel from Football Scoop, a guy who's kind of in on these kinds of stories this time of year, says, we're also told, in addition to Florida and UCLA, another program has contacted Kelly's representatives to discuss possibilities should an opening occur at their university. I think I have a guess as to who this is, but based on what we were saying before the show, we don't have the same guess.
No.
I think it's Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I think it's A&M.
I think it's a fair guess. I think that they would be well served to do that. But I'm just telling you, it's the last part of that comment where he says, should an opening occur at the university? I think Texas A&M is known. So should an opening occur at that university? I think it's Auburn. I really do think that it's Auburn going out there kicking the tires saying, if we do have to move on from Gus Malzahn, you know, if the possibility comes and everybody's screaming for his head after this Iron Bowl or he does move on to Arkansas, and by the way, I think it's a great move on Auburn's part if it is Auburn to go out and reach out to Chip Kelly before you have to move on from Gus Malzahn or he moves on from you to maybe kick the tires on Chip Kelly. Say, hey, you know what? We got a pretty good job here. You know, I know you're looking at Florida and UCLA, but pretty good job could be coming open at Auburn, and I think they'd be well served to do that.
Well, here's the thing. Historically, Florida's a better program than Auburn is.
Right.
They've won national championships under multiple coaches. But right now, Auburn's a better job than Florida is. For right now, coaching in 2018, Auburn's a better job. If I was not a fan of either school, not an alumnus of either school, not connected, if I was Chip Kelly and had my choice of the Florida job and the Auburn job, I'd want the Auburn job. It's a better roster. You're having a better chance of winning. It's a program that's been used to sort of up-tempo spread. You're not changing over the offensive lineman style of play. You got Malik Willis there as a quarterback that could probably run the system that Chip Kelly wants to run. Now, we don't know if the Auburn job is going to come available. I think you and I both think it's more than likely probably not going to. But if you were right and I was wrong, it's the Auburn who's the third school that's contacted Chip Kelly. If I was Kelly, I'd wait on that job because it's a better job than Florida.
I think that's
just for right now.
I think that's what my point is. I think that Auburn, it would be very smart if you look at the situation surrounding Florida and UCLA. Obviously, their head coaching job is not open, but I think that they would be well served to just put it out there and say, hey, you know what? Don't make a decision just yet. We got a big game this weekend and possibly a lot of fallout afterwards. I think they'd be well served to call Chip Kelly's agent and say, you know what, this job might be out there. Just slow down and putting your signature on anything.
Bo Molinari's a big A&M fan. To me, says that A&M's not the mystery school. Aggie's the most penalized team in the history of the NCAA. They won't consider a coach with probation history, just saying. I mean, that's a guy that knows. He's close to the Texas A&M program as being a big fan. So his opinion on this I'm going to take seriously. Do you think that A&M's previous NCAA issues prohibit them getting involved with a coach like this who's also had NCAA issues?
Well, listen, every school that we're talking about, Florida, especially Auburn right now.
It's like, listen, Texas A&M hasn't been in the SEC quite as long, but here's the thing with the SEC. We've all been on probation at some
Tennessee,
point in time.
we can talk about all of them.
I mean, wasn't that long ago, like 9 of the 10 schools in the league were on probation at the same time?
Yeah, it's like, I know that there's a lot of people out there say, you know what, we wouldn't want Chip Kelly. The bottom line is Chip Kelly is the best guy out there right now. The SEC, from everything I've heard, Greg Sankey's already signed off on him coming to the SEC, so I don't think it's that big of a risk, in my opinion.
Yeah, I actually kind of don't think it is either. I don't think that A&M, now I'm not an A&M fan, so I can't say what's being said in College Station about that particular fact, but from my sort of 10,000 feet viewpoint, I can't imagine A&M would be scared off of Chip Kelly because of his previous NCAA transgressions. The truth is, I mean, we are in such a different era when it comes to that kind of stuff. Yeah. Schools are sort of blatantly, cheating in some regards and not even getting punished by the NCAA if you look at basketball and things like that, which is a different topic for a different day. I don't think that many schools are scared of the NCAA anymore.
I would make the argument, too, that it's more likely that Texas A&M would take them after the sanctions than is Auburn, right? When you look at what's going on with Auburn, specifically the basketball program, I think they would be the school that needed to be more careful than A&M.
But the question is, while it seems true that Auburn should want to be more careful, do they actually want to? I mean, if you believe the rumors, they would consider Bobby Petrino, who's a little bit different kind of guy in terms of the NCAA stuff. We don't know as much of that about him, but we know about his personal behavior. I mean, that's a pretty cavalier decision for a school that's literally embroiled in scandal and like every other athletic department.
Well, and the backstory I have to give in the full disclosure is that I don't think that Auburn by any means has offered the job to Chip Kelly or thinks they're going to move on from Gus. That's not what we're talking about here. we're going a different direction. I think that Jimbo Fisher would be target number one. I just think they're well served to say, hey, you know what? There is a small possibility that this happens, so we don't want you to just go into this final weekend with your signature already on the paper from Florida or UCLA. Just wait on for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on here to item number 8. Here on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Kind of an interesting statement coming from Damian Harris. He gives this to AL.com. Obviously a childhood friend of Jarrett Stidham, a guy he knows really well, and he kind of joked to AL.com that he means he and his mother, both prayed that he, meaning Jarrett Stidham, wouldn't go to Auburn because I just knew how good he was. And I was just like, man, he can't go to Auburn. I hope he goes anywhere but Auburn. That's Harris obviously talking about one of his friends in Jarrett Stidham, but what he says there about Stidham is kind of a preview of what I've been thinking about the Iron Bowl all along, is that Jarrett Stidham does have a chance to make a huge impact in this game. So in a lot of ways, I think what Damian Harris says there is kind of a backdrop for what we've been saying, or at least what I've been saying all along.
Yeah, and I think Damian Harris understands it. And there's a great article, by the way, on AL.com if you get a chance to read it, about growing up in Richmond, Kentucky, then playing on the same Little League team, getting a chance to kind of be the running back, quarterback combo, I guess, on that Little League team, and how they've kind of kept in touch or reignited really the friendship at the opening up in Oregon, during their recruitment, and have kind of reignited that friendship now. Very interesting, and I think that, listen, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that Jarrett Stidham's not a good quarterback. I think that, a lot of Bama fans look at it and say, we don't care if he went to Alabama. He's a good quarterback, and he's better than anything they would have had on the roster otherwise if he had not signed down there at Auburn. I don't think we're looking at the same football team without Jarrett Stidham. So I think that Damian Harris and his mother were probably well served to say, hey, you know what, we hope he doesn't wind up down there. But it makes for a really, really intriguing story, specifically on weeks like this when the Iron Bowl means everything in the college football world.
James Crump says 2 picks by Stidham, 1 for a touchdown. I can buy that. That's a guy who's on Alabama, at least for this Saturday. Brock Weaver, the other side, though. Damian Harris, he says, knows he's going to get that L with Stidham there. And I think it takes a otherworldly quarterback to beat Alabama now, or at least a quarterback who can play like that way for one game. It's a Deshaun Watson. It's a Johnny Manziel from his college years. It's a Cam Newton in 2010. I mean, if you don't have that otherworldly quarterback, and a guy like Carl Jones at least played that way in the 2014 postseason, you've got to have a big performance from your quarterback if you want to beat Alabama. I mean, I know it's going to be an overhyped storyline, but I don't think you can accurately describe just how much pressure is sort of heaped at the feet of Jarrett Stidham for this football game.
Yeah, I agree. And I do agree with some of the instances out there. This is a little bit different of an Alabama defense than most teams have seen for the last few years. I don't know if they are as challenging in that front seven that they have been, or as imposing, I guess is the right word for it. But it's like we talked about earlier in the show. Jarrett Stidham's the guy that's going to have to get this done. We can lean on Kerryon Johnson, but very, very, very few times has this game been won on the back of a running back. Very few times has anybody beaten Nick Saban on the back of a running back. Jarrett Stidham's got to be the catalyst for this offense, and they have to show some kind of balance.
James Crump says that Stidham's going to be huge in this game, ... for Alabama. Listen, James, I love your contribution. I love your opinions. I think you're wrong on this. I mean, look at Stidham this year. He did not play well in the 2 Auburn losses, but he wasn't the reason they lost.
Right.
He got sacked 11 times versus Clemson. Auburn's essentially reworked its offensive line since then. Did not show up big in the LSU game in the 4th quarter, but it wasn't his decision-making that cost that game. You can make a case it was the Auburn coach's decision-making around Stidham that may have cost his team that game. I mean, I haven't seen Stidham be a problem for Auburn all season long. What I've really seen from Stidham is a guy that's sort of distributing the football, all across the field, super high completion percentage, incredibly accurate. This is not the kind of guy who's going to throw Auburn into a loss here. They may lose the game, but I don't see Stidham wilting in this moment. After all, he's in his own home stadium.
Well, in my opinion, if that did happen, if that that prediction comes true, and you do have 2 picks from Jarrett Stidham, I think that Gus Malzahn's seat's going to be very hot when it comes to Sunday. I think that a lot of people will be ready to move on because, in my opinion, it hasn't been Jarrett Stidham that's been the problem when they have lost games this year. It's been Gus Malzahn and Chip Lindsey. And we've made that very apparent on the show that I still don't know what the attack was when they were playing Clemson. I'm not sure what exactly the game plan was going in that stadium. And I'm not sure what it was in the second half against LSU. I think if Jarrett Stidham struggles, it's probably on the back of Gus Malzahn more than it is Stidham.
So what James said back in the comment section was that if it was Deshaun Watson or Cam Newton, he would pick Auburn. What I take him to mean there is he likes dual threat quarterbacks against Alabama. So I'll ask you: is Stidham more too one-dimensional? And he's not. I mean, listen, he's got some mobility. He was rated as a dual threat quarterback coming out of high school, I believe. But is Is he more one-dimensional than the quarterbacks that typically beat Alabama?
Typically, yes. I think he's a little bit more one-dimensional, but there is, when you look at Nick Saban's background at Alabama, there has been guys, and I said this yesterday. You go back to Stephen Garcia at South Carolina. You go back to possibly like a Trevor Knight at Oklahoma. There has been ways around that. Now, you do have to have a guy that can go in the backfield and make plays. But I kind of put Jarrett Stidham in maybe like that Chad Kelly range, or maybe that range where, listen, you're not going to have a ton of running plays for the guy. He's not going to rip off 100 yards rushing, but he's athletic enough to kind of get out of the pocket and make things happen. I think that's the one thing that's in Jarrett Stidham's category.
It's keeping plays alive here, too, which can be kind of dangerous. And also just competent enough to kind of run some of the spread option stuff that Auburn wants to run when it runs that. All right, we got more of our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 coming up. For now, though, let's get ready to look back to the past for a moment. This week, one of the significant things that happened around the SEC was the implosion of the Georgia Dome, a venue that had been host to the SEC Championship dating all the way back to 1994. Well, speaking of 1994, that's the year in the spotlight this week for our Tony Chachere's Season to Remember. Take a look.
Tony Chachere's presents Seasons to Remember and a look back at 1994. A year on our minds this week due to the implosion of the Georgia Dome, collapsed into obsolescence, but the proud home of the SEC Championship for 23 seasons, dating back to the league's inaugural appearance in Atlanta in 1994. A season remembered as one of the glory years for Steve Spurrier at Florida. The Gators won their second consecutive SEC Championship 24-23 versus Alabama, in the third straight meeting with the Crimson Tide in the league's title game. Florida would also go on to win the SEC Championship in 1995 and 96. The Gators' streak of 4 straight conference championships hasn't been matched since then, but Alabama will attempt to equal that feat this year if it can earn a berth into the title game in its brand-new venue, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Elsewhere in the SEC, 1994 was a good year for Auburn, which, despite sanctions that prohibited the Tigers from playing in a bowl game, put together a 9-1-1 record and at one point owned a 20-game winning streak. Mississippi State also finished in the top 25 that season under Coach Jackie Sherrill, as did Tennessee and its freshman quarterback Peyton Manning, who entered the game versus Sherrill's Bulldogs in September because of an injury and never looked back on his way to a record-setting career. Just one of the figures that makes 1994 a season to remember.
I got to say this here for a moment. This is like my one big moment all week. We do Tony Chachere's Season to Remember. It's like my moment for a close-up. And honestly, it gets ruined every week by all the people in this room because everybody laughs at me right as I do it. Why do people laugh at me for doing my close-up?
We're laughing with you, man. We're laughing right along with you and giving it the slogan line.
Listen, Tony Chachere's Season to Remember is brought to you every week by Tony Chachere's, the tailgate champions since 1972. And y'all stop laughing at me because Tony Chachere's makes everything taste great. If you're looking to spice up your next tailgate, look no further than my friends at Tony Chachere's, who will bring the Season to Remember to you each and every week here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Now, a young whippersnapper like you probably does. Stop! I'm telling you, I'm going to spike this Tony Chachere's. This is my chance to be on camera, get my close-up. Y'all ruin it.
You got to love on the sponsors, man. I think you do good. You do good.
You got to take care of them. You probably don't even remember 1994, do you?
Second grade, I think I was.
Were you really? I was a
a
junior in high school in 1994.
Yeah.
Were you really in second grade?
Second grade, yeah. I was
Peyton Manning's freshman year, though.
I was born in '87, so yeah, second year. Yeah, obviously a good time for a lot of SEC football fans as well.
Very first SEC championship in the Georgia Dome, but a brand new Mercedes-Benz Stadium this year is going to be a lot of fun.
Getting ready to get broke in, and I can't wait to get to this weekend. I know that it's been one of those weeks where you're just ready to get to Thanksgiving, talk about the Iron Bowl, talk about the Egg Bowl with everybody sitting around the table, and Georgia just kind of, they play Georgia Tech, but all of a sudden they get to kick back and watch that Iron Bowl. I think it's going to be a crazy way the season plays out.
By the way, Bo Molinari says that Tony Chachere's really does make everything taste great. So sure enough, you're looking to do some fun stuff, tailgating. Yeah. By the way, put this thing on a, like a fried or smoked turkey, something like that. I imagine they make everything taste good.
I love Tony Chachere's. I use it all the time. I laugh at you, for your solo, but I definitely use the product for sure.
By the way, Tyler Mann was born in 1994. It's nice to have young folks like Tyler watching the show. That makes me feel pretty old.
Yeah, it makes me feel kind of old too.
Michael, who helps produce our show, you were born in 1994 as well? Man. My goodness.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm really old.
Whippersnappers.
I tell you what, I'm really old. Let me move on, make myself feel better here. Let me do item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list. So, in a weird way, one of the rivalries that I'm the most excited about this weekend is actually South Carolina-Clemson.
Yeah.
Clemson's riding high. It looks like they're heading for the college football playoff. One little thing they got to do for the ACC championship game, though. It's no big deal. You just have to sort of walk into Williams-Brice Stadium. A Williams-Brice Stadium that could be rocking and rolling this weekend. I thought that South Carolina produced a great hype video. And what's cool about this is a lot of hype videos kind of focus in on the coach or focus on the players. But South Carolina knows what it's going to take to make up the difference against the defending national champion Clemson. They know it's going to be done by the fans who create an atmosphere that allows the underdog to rise up. Watch a little bit of this and tell me it doesn't get you fired up for this rivalry game on Saturday, especially if you're a Gamecocks fan. This is produced by South Carolina. Take a look.
3, 2, 1.
And you could feel the energy in the stadium. It's the electricity here in Columbia. What has been buzzing loudly all weekend. Here come the Gamecocks.
So that's essentially the video. You know, they kind of talk about the atmosphere, the attitude of the fans, and what that means there. Now, let me ask you a couple serious questions about this. Do you think the fans can make the difference for South Carolina against Clemson on Saturday? Not even to win the game so much, because that may be asking a little too much.
Right.
But in terms of, hey, this is closer than it should be. This is Clemson getting a fight from South Carolina. Can the fans make the difference there that much?
I think they can for sure. I mean, when you look at what Clemson's really faced this year, and it's not that they haven't played a tough schedule. They played an extremely tough schedule. But Kelly Bryant, this will be his first time really manning the quarterback position for Clemson in this game. Let me tell you another angle I'm going to take this to. How many times have we talked before the season, specifically around media days, about how good the ACC was?
Oh, yeah.
And how they were supposed to be holding up the trophy. They better hope that Clemson wins this game. Can you look around what the ACC has been? If Miami is the second best team right now, hasn't really played a ton of people. If South Carolina wins this game, and then you have Florida making a fight against FSU, man, that puts South Carolina beating NC State and Clemson possibly in 1 year. That'd be a bad look.
Jason Nelson says South Carolina just might upset Clemson. Yeah. I got to tell you, of all the stadiums I've been to in the SEC, one of the sneaky loudest is Williams-Brice.
Yeah.
And that's true in years like this when the Gamecocks have a pretty good record. It's been true in other years when South Carolina did not have a very good record. But those fans get after it. And I do think, and you obviously played a lot of these rivalry games, I do think that home field edge here does close the gap at least a little bit.
I think so too. You know what's interesting enough, of the 12 teams that were in the SEC when I played, that was the only stadium I never traveled to.
Oh, is that right?
Just hit an odd year to where I was redshirted when that game was going on in 2005, and they went back in 2010. So kind of one of those interesting things about my career. But everybody that came back from that game, we're talking about how loud the fans were in 2005, and obviously they had a lot of success against Bama in 2010. So I definitely think it's a hostile atmosphere for sure.
Robert Porter says Spurs up. Robert, thanks for watching the show today. Jeremy Pettis says if Syracuse can beat Clemson, South Carolina can as well. And maybe it is as simple as that. And also, let's not forget this. You talk about the narrative of the ACC in the offseason. I mean, South Carolina was ranked in the top 25 this week by the playoff selection committee. I think Will Muschamp is doing something pretty good there. With Tennessee and Florida both looking for coaches right now, the permanence being sort of established at South Carolina, I think that this Clemson game is important for that.
I agree with you. You have to look at Will Muschamp as possibly being the SEC Coach of the Year, and they're a little bit better on the offensive line than they were last year. They're way better, in my opinion, in the front seven than they were a year ago, and we've talked about Jake Bentley a ton. I think they have to be able to get that offense going. It's going to be a tough task against Clemson's defense. They got great athletes over there, but I kind of approach this the same way we just talked about the last one. We're talking about Jarrett Stidham. When you have Jake Bentley in the backfield and he can create and is not afraid to throw that ball downfield, I think that makes for a special game in a lot of ways.
By the way, not to change the subject, but Corey Tester, who's been on this Gruden thing all week, says this Monday, gentlemen, Gruden's going to be announced as the Tennessee coach. Listen, I hope for Tennessee fans' sake, I hope it is true because a lot of them want John Gruden. I appreciate the fact that Corey has been unwavering on this the entire time. We'll see how that plays out. Corey, thanks for weighing in on AT&T SEC Country Live on that front. By the way, speaking of that, my name is Brandon Adams. This is Mike Johnson. We appreciate all of you watching the show here on the day before Thanksgiving, and we'll do a quick reminder here that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. I'll also tell you to please make sure you join us next Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time in Atlanta, downtown, the Hooters location right there on Peachtree Street. We'll do a special live broadcast on Facebook Live, so if you're not otherwise engaged, you can watch the show on Facebook Live. But if you're near Atlanta, either a Georgia fan, a fan of the school that wins the SEC West, join us in person. Hooters downtown, 7 p.m. We'd love to meet you for a special live broadcast of AT&T SEC Country Live. And, of course, check out Hooters online. Hooters to go, $25 orders or more, you can get $5 off if you use the promo code SEC Fans. But it's got to be an online order, Hooters.com. $5 off your order of $25 or more. Let me do item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And one of the SEC storylines from Tuesday night's college football playoff rankings reveal was Mississippi State, who moves up in the rankings after losing last week or 2 Saturdays ago and playing relatively close with a not-so-great Arkansas team. But Mississippi State goes from 16 to 14 in the rankings, and Kirby Hocutt, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee chairman, explains that, well, they're impressed with Mississippi State right now. Paul Meyerberg also gives us this, that we talked at length this week about Mississippi State. The selection committee has been extremely impressed with their tough schedule. I think their tough schedule continues to impress, which he says from the Department of Redundancy Department. But, so, I mean, how impressed are you with what Mississippi State's been doing?
It took me a minute to understand what you had just said, but listen, I think there is a lot of proponents about what Mississippi State is right now. I think they're a good team. I'm one of them. But to me, there's a difference between playing a tough schedule and winning some of those tough games. I don't know that Mississippi State has. I think you look at their schedule, you look at their 3 losses, you look at 3 top 7 teams. But guess what? Outside of that, they haven't beaten a ton of teams other than LSU. When you look at the blowout they had early in the season, I think that's a different LSU team now. So I'm definitely on Mississippi State's bandwagon. I think they're a good team. I love what Dan Mullen's been there. I think they're tough. I think they're more physical than you've seen Mississippi State in quite some time. But I don't know that you can look at their schedule and say tough schedule, in my opinion.
Well, here's what I want to say, and I'm going to try to sort of see if I can split the difference on this. Can I thread the needle on this? I think Mississippi State is good. But as a sort of point of order, it kind of gets on my nerves when we call a team schedule tough when it's lost all its truly
exactly.
tough games.
That's kind of my
point. They beat LSU, give them credit for that. But, okay, Auburn and Georgia are both really good. They got blown out in both those games. They played Alabama tough. They still lost.
At home,
they gave up the lead at home. So, I mean, while I do honestly believe that Mississippi State's good, I don't like this notion of we're going to give a bunch of credit to a team for losing all its games to truly premier opponents.
And an interesting thing, too, about Mississippi State's schedule is BYU was their other big opponent, their non-conference opponent. You look at Louisiana Tech, they're one of those schools that didn't play like another Power 5 opponent. When you look at their schedule, everybody else in the SEC has done that, but they signed BYU up for that game. They played UMass, played on the road against Louisiana Tech, and I think won by a pretty good margin, but gave up a few touchdowns to Louisiana Tech. So by no means is this schedule just wall-to-wall crazy packed with teams they've been able to knock off.
For our champion of life, in just a moment, we have an update to a story that we've covered before. And this is a pretty interesting development here on this case. We'll give that to you coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, big weekend in the SEC. Let's get you ready for it all with our AT&T look ahead starting on Thanksgiving night. The Egg Bowl, aforementioned Mississippi State taking on Ole Miss. That's a good one. Missouri, Arkansas. Missouri tries to stay hot. Georgia Tech. That's going to be a lot of fun for dog fans as a tune-up for the SEC Championship. Florida State, Florida. Mike, in most years, this would be a good game. This year, as somebody said, maybe more warranting Comedy Central than a spot on ESPN.
I'm from Florida, BA, so a lot of people at my Thanksgiving table will be talking about this game, but definitely not the way they've been talking about it years past. I think that Florida definitely wants to get over the hump against Florida State, but neither one of these teams are very good.
One of a handful of SEC versus ACC games, one of 2 games this weekend called the Governor's Cup. Louisville takes on Kentucky. Alabama, Auburn, the Iron Bowl. As a guy who played in this game, as an Alabama alumnus, can you sum up just how much the Iron Bowl means to you?
It means everything. These people, this is not just, this trash talk doesn't just go on this week. I think that's what's different in a lot of these circumstances. These fan bases have been talking trash for the whole year. I mean, it's like, Jared Stidham signed, hey, we're going to beat y'all this year, and then, you stumble in some of these games. This trash talk's been taking place for 365 days, not just this week, but, we're finally going to see the matchup on the field.
The exact opposite of the Iron Bowl may be Vanderbilt, Tennessee. It may be more like the Iron Deficient Bowl. 2 winless teams in the SEC battling for that first conference win. You got Clemson, South Carolina. We talked about that. Have not talked much about Texas A&M, LSU. Is this a better game than I'm giving it credit for? I assume that LSU rolls here because I think that A&M's essentially quit because they know that someone's getting fired. What do you think about that?
Listen, before the Kevin Sumlin news came out, I was all on board with Texas A&M. I thought they'd keep it tight until the end. I think that they've been playing okay football, but now the news about Kevin Sumlin's out, I think that LSU will probably make this, probably catch that point spread. I'm not sure this one will be close in the end.
So wherever you're watching SEC football this weekend, we hope you enjoy that crop of games, and hopefully you don't get yourself in trouble. Because if a police officer tells you to put out your cigarette, for goodness sakes, put it out. We had the video for you a couple of weeks ago about the gal who did not want to do that at Bryant-Denny Stadium. It was a little bit confusing at the time as to what exactly happened. Well, one local TV station there in the state of Alabama has captured the police body cam footage. We'll make that the subject of our Champion of Life today. You can see more of this at SECcountry.com. Let's kind of see how this goes down here.
Oh, man.
Look how shocked this woman is. This woman is shocked. And by the way, if all you heard was the audio, this is very disconcerting. Like, you don't really see what's happening. It's very difficult to figure out what's happening here. So for those of you who don't remember, she's actually being dragged out of the stadium. Now, my favorite part, Mike, is coming up in a moment. Watch all these Alabama fans, every single one of them, cell phones out, videoing this whole thing.
I know.
Well, it's about to come up for those of you who haven't seen this. Take a look at this. I love the Hounds.
I gotta say, man, this guy handles this 10 times better than I would have. This police.
Look at all the people. Look at all the people just shooting this thing by a cell phone.
It's just
they're all shooting this. Okay, so but here's the thing, and we'll wrap up. That's probably all we need to see of that. Can we not figure out something to do besides dragging this gal out of this Bryant-Denny Stadium? I know. Put your cigarette out. I do get that, but can we diffuse the situation?
But how? I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what you look at. He tells her in the video like a million times, "Hey, get up! I don't want to have to drag you out of the stadium. Please get up." I don't know what else he's supposed to do. I mean, you're going to bring 5 more police officers. You're going to have to crowd surf her out of the building. Otherwise, there's no good look from this. He handled it way better than I would. I'd have been like, "Get your butt up."
Jeremy Pettis pointing out she is dressed in her Houndstooth attire there.
Any fan base wants to point at this and say, "Y'all's fans," trust me, there's a video out there of your fans too. I have no doubt about it.
Hey, y'all have a happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for being with us. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We'll have the show up immediately after the show. You can listen to the full thing, audio version. And a great way to say thank you to us would be to share this show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking about the SEC here each and every day on AT&T SEC Country Live. But more importantly than that, we want to thank you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for comments. Thanks for just making this a fun place to come and be at 3 p.m. Eastern Time each and every day. Hope y'all enjoy a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the games this weekend. We'll see you on Monday for another episode of AT&T SEC Country Live.